is, I think this is important. What I'm trying to do for you folks with this series, I realize this as I went through tonight, is the same thing that I'm trying to do when I was a college professor and I was teaching economics classes. And I would stand on the front end and be transparent with kids. I felt awkward, always, especially if it wasn't a rubber year. I felt more comfortable with the economics majors, especially when they were signing up for me, was an optional elective, I guess, the word we want to use. Right then, you didn't need to take my seminar game theory in order to graduate with a degree in economics from LSAT. But you could choose that to satisfy some generic, you take as many credit hours in the economics department, graduate with that degree. Right, so because then I knew that they're relative to other students, all these students are here over on free will, and so I'm really gonna, not feel hindered in when I teach it. But anyway, throughout all of the classes, I would, especially for the ones where it was like, any business major has to take principles of micro 201. I think my schedule's more few 8:30 or what was it? And I like some kids' names. So I always felt a little bit timid. So what I would do is I would say, look, I studied this stuff. I think it's very important for the world. I do believe in the stuff I'm going to teach you this semester, but I want you to understand, I don't expect you to pretend that I convinced you. And so on the tests, I'm not going to ask you, is a tariff good or bad, do you think? Or, should the government have capital gains tax on it? Or, does the central bank cause the business cycle? I'm not going to answer those questions because then you're going to feel pressure to answer the way you think I want you to. So instead, I'm just going to say, what does a libertarian economist or a free market economist say about minimum wage allowance? What would they see? What's the objection that a progressive economist might bring regarding the recent literature? And what would you see on me? So I'm not asking them, what do you think? I do let them do that, if they want to do a midterm paper instead of taking an in-class test, I would do stuff like that. Even there, I gave them options. Because you could just do a standard test, multiple choice or short answer in blue books, or you can write a paper. But I'd love them to select in that. Because it's for myself. But if you want to be the future of this country, ask a bunch of 20-year-olds to write you an essay. That has a thesis statement. A lot of them thought they were going to get a report. Or a summary of various things they had met and didn't understand. You should show. In that environment, we'll homeschool kids. They would know. They're going to say what I'm saying. Tuition in that sense. Right? So that was amazing. Just that. But anyway, what I would say to them is, you don't have to, just like I like an intro philosophy class, like an intro philosophy class. It's good if you don't know what the professor of philosophy actually thinks personally. Like I said, he's almost letting you now or she, as a professor, when you're explaining philosophy, but there it's all about the merits of these various ideas. What would the critic of that say? And then what would the response be from the supporter of that? Okay, very good. See? So that's what I'm doing here. Especially if you think Christianity, particularly the Calvinist flavor of it, is just nutty, and how can anybody even believe that? Oh my gosh, geez, okay, lose my water. And believe me, I get it. I used to be you. I'm saying you don't understand it. And so that's what I'm doing with this. I just want you to listen to the series over time, start to go, oh yeah, I guess from their point of view, that is a way they can think about it, and they're not just utterly stupid or evil for walking around with that idea floating in their head. I see more why they can plausibly think they're being intellectually honest and good people by holding those views, which prima facie strike any non-believer is absolutely wicked and crazy, right? So I get where both people are coming from, and I'm going to say, so because of that, right, that by itself proves the haters are wrong, right? Because the haters' position relies on it being impossible for their opponents on these matters to earnestly believe from a good place the stuff that they believe or that they say they believe. Right? So if I can show you that no, there's a way that could be done where someone could hold these views, even who is quite rational and is not an awful person, then that's all that needs to be proven on that score. Okay, so one other thing too, Trey, I had when I was reflecting on the last episode, some things came out again, this divide between God being sovereign and everything being according to his will and his plan, and on the other hand, that man seems to have genuine free will. Like it really does seem like God has given us freedom, at least in a circumscribed zone, and we can't just jump up the mountains around Mars. But on the other hand, it does feel like there are certain things that happen to us in the immediate future that we have a strong influence over. Right? If you lose your temper with somebody at the coffee shop, and you feel when you walk like, I could handle that differently, right? Well, we should think like that. As opposed to, that guy's really pushing my buttons, right? Even there, in our everyday speech. You see the distinction between harmonies and God. Okay, but anyway, just to go along with, I was trying to reconcile, because I really do think both camps. Look at it this way. Somebody who was a Calvinist chimed in, being a very sharp guy, after the last episode and said, yeah, Bob, we already have the grand unified theology, to use your terminology. It's called Reformed, systematic Reformed theology. That anything that's true of the Arminian camp, we already have in our camp over here on the Reformed side. And so you don't need to, search is over, even with you all the while, right? And likewise, so no one, I can think of, well, I have talked to people, Arminians, who say, hey, we believe in predestination too, right? Which actually surprised me when she first said that. And when she said it, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I do see all the time when people misrepresent what their critics believe, right? And so I realized, because I relied so heavily on Reform or Calvinist theologians and preachers, I just, I had this image of what most of the Arminian believed that was for them talking about, because my personal upbringing before I realized I was Roman Catholic, right? So I didn't know, I barely understood what Protestantism was, right? So I was surprised when this girl who was Arminian said, we believe in predestination too, right? And I got thinking, I was like, yeah, how could you, if you think God's omnipotent and omniscient, it's kind of hard to get around some sense of that term. So then really what the argument between the so-called Arminians and Calvinists wasn't even about do humans have free will, or is God sovereign and does he predestine what happens? There's versions of those doctrines or statements that either or both camps would agree with. Okay? So the issue was, but at the same time, it's not that they all believe the same thing. They don't. I've talked to them. Their views are incompatible in their current versions, which is why I made the analogy to physics where, again, to refresh your memory, I said the equations of general relativity work really well in predicting macro events in the physical universe, like the orbit of the planets around our sun or the behavior of clusters of galaxies, at humongous scales. Whereas when you shrink down the length of the analysis, then the scale, at some point you really have to start paying attention to quantum effects. And then ultimately, when you get down to it, the behavior of an individual atom and its constituent parts. It's not really like, oh yeah, the atom is really just like the nucleus is kind of like the sun, and then the electrons are like planets that go around. Like, no, it's not. It's really not like that. Like the nature of reality itself at that level seems to just not be like that. It's not just that, oh, it's kind of like our world, it's smaller. Because partly, if you think about it, how could that work? Because then it would just raise the question, okay, so then the nucleus, what is it? If we know that real billiard balls really aren't the solid sphere, then why would you look? If you just thought of the atom, the molecules that's making up the cue ball or whatever, inside the atom, it's like, well, it's kind of like a solar system. That would just raise the question again of, well, we're transmitting matter at our scale by reference to small constituent parts, and so would you just put it infinitely small? And quantum theory says no, it doesn't. We actually do have a concept, Planck length. There's a lower limit on how much you can actually shrink something in the physical world. Okay? So that's how you explain those two extreme, but unfortunately, general relativity and quantum theory, their current versions, are mathematically incompatible, so they can't both be right at the same time. And so that's what I'm saying over here, that the way I hear Arminians and Calvinists talk right now is those two systems don't fully integrate together. And that's why they correctly say, no, those other guys we're disagreeing with them. That's what they actually have genuine disagreements, not just equivalent over semantics or something. There's a substantive difference in their views, which is why we just conclude neither of them can have a fully, they can't both be true. Put it that way. All right. So anyway, going along with that stuff, I was trying to reconcile, and I think I stumbled upon something, so I want to share that before jumping into the material for tonight. That I was trying to see like this idea again of you're saved when you believe, and so God wants somebody to believe, and yet it's not based on their conduct or whatever. That's interesting. I'm trying to bridge that, and so I thought of a different thing. So try this one. Suppose somebody is the heir to the throne, right? There was a kid that he was lost, got separated from his parents or somehow, from some story. He grows up as a stranger to the court, but actually he's literally the full biological son of the king and the queen. And just, somehow he grew up outside of the palace gates as a lowly common man. That's who he thought he was. He genuinely did not believe he was heir to the throne. So before it is officially made so, the soldiers would get him and bring him back, and then they take him to the religious ceremonies and whatever, and just force him to become the new king once his dad dies. It can't affect his life if he doesn't believe it, right? But if he did believe it, right? So even before the formal thing happened where his parents kick the bucket and he's made the new king, before that happens, knowing that's going to happen would totally affect his life, even before it was made official, right? And so how could those future things channel back and cause changes in your current state of affairs through your anticipation and other way you might describe that relationship? It's only through you believing in it. And yet, the actual world that you experience is going to be different if you genuinely believe that. Okay? And so, when we brush up and say stuff like, does God make you believe, or do you choose to believe? It gets really tricky because actually Calvinists want to say, no, there is a sense in which God's making you believe. Like you didn't choose to do that, because then that suggests there is a sense in which something you did of your own power is what ultimately was the key to your salvation. And then they want to completely cut that off in the past. Say, no, God is in charge of every detail, period. Stop trying to limit him and say he's got to work with you, And he's like, oh, what am I going to deal with these rebellious, sinful people? Let me try plan C. Like, no, that's not what's going on. Okay. But yet, on the flip side of that, so what I just said, I think was correct. You can see what I mean. It's like unreasonable for me to say those sentences I've said. But on the other hand, there is a sense in which you can say a rock believes the law of gravity, right? You can say your stomach believes in digesting food. So believe is not tied purely to your bodily movements. It suggests it has something to do with your will, right? Because also notice it's not no. But they're also, those are very, given the type of thing we're talking about, it's interesting, right? So there's even fine distinctions there. Like, there's passages in the Bible that's really cool where the demons know who Jesus is. They're scared of him. Like, they're bargaining with him. Like, oh, don't do this, cast me into those pigs over there. Like, we'll get to that. Like, it's Legion, by the way, right? So that's why it's cool. It's not like there's a battle between good and evil. It's not like, oh, if 18,000 demons piled up and, jumped Jesus from behind when he was distracted by, healing a lame guy, then, thousands of demons sucker punch him. It's an outlander. He's like, oh, when he sticks his hand up and gets up. No. They couldn't sneak him out for one thing, and also they wouldn't hurt him. And no, they're terrified of him. They know who he is. They know he's going to say something, and it has to be true. It's the nature of the universe. That if Jesus or God says something, then boom, it is true. It's almost like by definition. Okay. So when the Gospels say you have to believe in Jesus or believe on him or believe in his name, and that's how you're saved, it's not quite the same thing as saying you have to intellectually assent to the proposition that Jesus is the Son of God. Those are not quite the same thing, right? And when you try to put your finger on what is it that makes believe in Jesus different from other statements that you might affirm about Jesus, you get into that where it's like your will. You kind of have to endorse the spirit of what this chain of logic is doing for us. Right? I don't know, I'm going down this path, see what I mean? So anyway, so when you start poking around in that zone, I think that sheds some light on why is it that there's a distinction between faith and works. But if the work of God is to believe in him whom he sent, that's so anyway, I think what's happening is when we look at see this chasm between Calvinism and Arminianism, the problem is the way we're framing the situation that we're trying to explain. If you mischaracterize it or classify it, and then say, okay, I'll come up with a theory to make sense of all of these observations I've made, but what you're choosing to write down mentally as observations and data points is it's still influenced by the framework you're deploying to be able to interpret what's going on. So you can be around in a circle or get the answer that your framework spits out, but that's because your framework is kind of designed to give you that sort of answer. Okay, so that's kind of where we are on that issue. How about this God designed the universe such that if you adopt a method of truth discernment, which finds that John 3:16 is the truest that something can be, then you're saved. You win the game. Right? So God, clearly designed the universe to work a certain way, so He exists, right? And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the Christian Bible is correct in some sense. Well, if you just think the case that it's got to be the most important thing, it's not that the Christian Bible can be right, but there'd be a lot of other things that are more important than it. No, if the Christian Bible is right about what it says it is, then that's the most important thing. Right? And so, if it were true, then that would, the way of explaining it is you say, God designed the universe to operate according to certain principles such that the system that you use to determine whether you believe in something or not pops out that, oh yes, you adopted a value system, an intellectual framework, and a way of trying to parse out wisdom, things like that. You understand that there is a very important sense in which John 3:16 is true. Then you get into that point where you are like Neo, and you realize he's the law, where you transcend the conventional game and the rules in the simulation, if you want to think of it like that. Okay. By the way, what I'm doing here, I like the way William Lane Craig, people are asking about Molinism, he was explaining his framework and how he used Molinism, and we'll get into this at some point, to kind of reconcile man's freedom and free will with God's sovereignty. And what William Lane Craig said was, because one objection to that was, well, it's not biblical, like you're kind of making up these doctrines in Craig agreed. But when he made his understanding of the Trinity, things like that, where it's framework to explain things and read God, it's not really literally what Paul spelled out. This is what we mean by the Trinity, the attributes of the three persons. Right? So he says that, but he also just says for some things, look, he was explaining that things could be like God could have done it this way, but this could have been the logical order of events in this chain unfolding. And that could possibly be. And then notice Mr. Critic, who thinks the Bible is stupid. Or even Mr. Christian, who's in a rival camp and thinks Molinism is stupid, so they throw an objection at you. And so William Lane Craig will say, look, I'm just saying it could be like this, things could work this way, in which case your objection bounces off. Right? So your objection clearly isn't as strong as you thought it was. And so that's what I'm doing here, what I'm saying, or what if we get simulation, like the Matrix. So that's what I'm saying, that's the best way to think about what it is. And you think the universe is quite real, but I also think there's God exists who created it, it's like a sense in his mind. And so, is this somebody's dream? In a sense, but it's not really real. Well, no, because God is so much realer than what you think of as real, that his dream is as real as what you might think of as the real world. Right? So it's not that there's a contradiction. It's just that you're not fully comprehending the nature of the biblical God and his attributes. So, but that's, that's why I'm naming reference to the Matrix here, so you know that's what I'm not telling you where we have the Matrix, man. That's or simulation. I don't think it's simulation. Right? Because it's simulating that applied to personal things, copying. And that's not true. It's not that God is simulating the world he lives in his dream. No, that's not that he exists in the physical universe. Okay. And then so that raises the question too, where like, well, if in a sense this is just a system that was designed by his being, or just following the rules that he created. And yeah, maybe there's this thing where for us to believe in something suggests some notion of free will, and so maybe that's how those things get reconciled. And you might say, okay, but is there an absolute standard morality or truth in that universe? You feel it for it, but because that's what we're programmed or the fact that you believe Jesus is the Savior, because I was trying to argue a minute ago. What if the universe is just such boom, when that happens, that you can go around healing people? If that's what the situation calls for. Like it just unlocks, that's why I made the Neo reference. In case you're not getting that. The apostles, when Jesus said that, they were doing mighty works in his name. I believe that, right? I think it's just a fairy tale. And the reason I'm saying that is I've seen like the power of your mind over your body, right? So again, notice the merging of the mind and matter and dualism, all this stuff come together. So but you can learn that, right? So in that framework, is that just, okay, what we think is good and evil is just because that was built in our DNA or something? And it's, but I want to say, that distinction all seems meaningless to me, right? Because what we're trying to say is that if morality is objective, it's that because of that, the so-called fact value of falls away, which that's a way to put it. Maybe I have a job on this. Right, so again, Hume kind of just asserted that this fact value is off distinction, and you can't derive moral judgments from statements about how the world is.